Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of CTLN Opinion Plus. This is a space where we have conversations about the issues and concerns of the Latino community. And today we are talking about the constant and important mission of social justice and equality. And we are joined today by Mercy Quaye. She is the founder and consultant of the Narrative Project, Connecticut's first and only anti-racist social justice public relations agency. Thank you for joining us, Mercy. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Can you tell us about some of the work that the Narrative Project does?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, we are Connecticut's only anti-racist and social justice public relations agency. And the Narrative Project was sort of founded in 2015 as a conversation platform. We were tackling stories about issues of race and identity. We were meeting at a coffee shop in New Haven, and really this was around, the first one was around discussing the Black narrative and who controls the Black narrative. And this was shortly after the shooting of an unarmed Black man. I've said this story before, and in this story, I consistently say I don't know which one, but I think that actually goes towards the furthering the point there. After a while, what we ended up doing was, in doing privilege walks and race and identity workshops, we started working with organizations to combine their communications and public relations strategies with an anti-racist lens. So now we work with mission-driven organizations throughout the state, and one of our partners, the Human Rights Funders Network, an organization that we've worked with that is based down in Colombia. And the work that we do is really around centering the stories of impacted communities and ensuring that the communication strategies of the organizations that we work with have a lens into anti-racism, right? And so what that means is consistently interrogating your messages, consistently interrogating the perspective that you are coming from to draft a press release, to engage in press on a story, to create a campaign, right? Because it actually trickles through and out of all of the things that we do as communicators and public relations practitioners.
You said that you can't remember which event you were talking about, and I think it's so poignant and unfortunate to the direction of our country that we are unable to remember these people by name and by year, and all of their names need to be remembered and all of their stories need to be remembered, and this can't keep happening. Anyways, you said that you need to constantly be interrogating the message, correct? Why is a media relations agency so important when it comes to social justice and addressing racism?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And part of that is because the stories that we tell can actually connect people or divide us. And what we've seen, even just over the past 4 years of a Trump presidency, is, the narrative that he's pushed and put out around, racial demographics, you name it, from Black people to the Latino community. It has really created a divide between communities. And so when we think about communications, public relations, and media, it is at the root of it is about storytelling. And so what we try to do is bring justice to storytelling. And what we will say a great deal in explaining our work is, telling just stories, right? Or storytellers for good. Because if we are able to create those connections and create empathy through those stories, then we are one step closer to creating justice on a particular mission or issue.
I was just thinking about the Trump presidency, the dehumanization of Latinos in his reference of Latinos. So I think it's important what you're doing, and thank you for giving every person a voice and a story and an identity. So thank you for your work. What is your organization doing to influence the narrative of immigrants? Unfortunately, the right has taken it on themselves. Now that their leader is no longer.
Yeah. So it's really important. This is actually really important, and is part of what sets the Narrative Project aside from other public relations agencies. So other public relations agencies, they will accept, clients on issues that run the gamut. For us, we have a set of core and key issues, core values and key issues that all of the organizations that we work with have to be aligned into. And so one of those core values and key issues is immigration. And so at present, our organization is working with the communities that we serve and the organizations that we work with to ensure that your messaging around immigrant issues, whether that is Latino immigrants or whether that is, immigrants from the African continent, immigrants from, you name the country, right? That the narratives that we put out around immigrants are closely connected to the stories that they tell, right? Mm-hmm. And so part of the reason why we've named the agency the Narrative Project is because in those early conversations, it was around ensuring, or really just even thinking about, who owns the narrative of particular issues. And for us, the way you bring justice to the stories of immigrant communities is ensuring that the stories that you're telling are stories that are created by them, are stories that are told by them, right? It's about handing over the mic and not trying to be the person to explain on behalf of, right? And when we bring on a new partner, so we don't have clients at the Narrative Project. We call all of the organizations that we work with partners, because we are partnering to achieve your mission, right? And so when we bring on a new partner, one of the biggest things that we say is nothing about you without you, right? And we treat that the same, no matter if we're talking about a partner that has just joined the project, or if we are taking on a campaign about a particular issue for immigration in particular. One of our organizations, the organizations that we work with, the Black Infinity Collective, formerly known as the Connecticut CT Core Organized Now. Mm-hmm. They have done a great deal of work around police brutality, organizing, food justice, you name it. But one of the issues that they have been working on, that we've been supporting them with, particularly as it pertains to last year's pandemic, was understanding that when we are talking about stimulus checks, right, the immigrant community is typically left out of those conversations, right? Mm-hmm. And is typically a community that needs support, right? Perhaps even more so than other communities, but doesn't actually all the time have access to those sorts of supports. So with them, what we supported them with is a stimulus redistribution program where folks in their network were able to donate the portions of their stimulus check that they didn't need, or perhaps even the entirety of their stimulus check, so that they can reappropriate those funds to support the immigrant communities.
That's so unique. I've never heard of anything like that before. That's very innovative. Talking about the pandemic, we are going through two in this country, COVID-19 and the never-ending pandemic that is racism in this country. Mm-hmm. Seems like, again, bring it back to every 3 months, it almost feels like new anger and hate is escalated toward a group of color. And in your opinion, what can we do to change that narrative and stop this racial scapegoating that seems to just be a pattern of this country?
Yeah. So what can we do? Part of the thing is anti-racism is in action. We have spent years under the assumption that saying that I am not racist is enough, right? That not thinking of yourself, or rather thinking of yourself as not racist, is enough. That not being racist is enough. That's not nearly enough anymore. And what the events of last year's troublesome summer, as I've been calling it, have realized for many people is that action is needed. And so anti-racism at its core is about action, It is about ensuring that you're not something, you are actively against it. And so when it comes to, what can we do to ensure that people feel a little bit more connected, that we are able to combat the onslaught of hate that we're seeing? One, stories. I think the biggest thing that we need to be able to do is combat all of the counter narratives around communities of color, around people of color, around groups of color, need to be specifically countered with positive narratives that show the dignity and diversity within those groups, right? One thing that we are often pinned to or held to is the idea that all Black people are the same, and that's the biggest thing that allows hatred to spawn, right? Or all Latinos are the same, all Asians are the same, for instance, and not having a true understanding of what diversity looks like inside of those groups is fanning the flames. And so the number one thing that we need to do is always interrogate our thinking when it comes to issues around race and diversity.
When you say interrogate thinking, you mean constant conversation in development of your thinking, in the sense of like, am I addressing this correctly? Yep. Am I referring to this group as a homogenous community instead of an individual person or an individual situation? How do you think it's important to associate relating to that community, or should we just have empathy regardless of understanding?
Yeah, so that's complicated. And I think that is a decision each person can make on their own. I think what's necessary is empathy. Now, whether you feel as though you need to relate to, so the idea of years past that has been about, my best friend is Black, right? You relate to a Black person. You relating to a Black person doesn't actually give you the empathy of that community. So I think that empathy is far more important than that relational piece. But that relational piece is often the gateway to the next step. So right. Each person, the avenue that you take down, whether it's, I know Black people, I know Latinos, right? And as such, I'm going to actively interrogate my thoughts, or I have empathy for folks that I've never met. And as such, I'm going to interrogate my thoughts. Whatever your entry point is, I think that it's fine as long as what you're doing next is consistently bringing yourself from the first thought to the second thought. Your second thought on race and identity should always be, right? Am I thinking about this the right way? Mm-hmm. Have I brought to this conversation something that has been ingrained in me from societal narratives, as opposed to something that I have done my own research on, or challenged in some way?
I think what is wonderful about at least my community, my experience as a Latina, is that there has been an emphasis on education and constantly educating myself and ourselves. And I find that also with those that I grew up around. But I think it is important to constantly be questioning what you've been told and constantly be educating yourself, because the country is moving and becoming more diverse every single day. And I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have one last question for you. We are experiencing a few things right now. You mentioned something about your partners in Colombia. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And then what are some organizations that we should direct our resources to?
Mm-hmm. So the Human Rights Funders Network, HRFN, we worked with them for a period of time last year and for the beginning of this year. And what we were working with them on was really bringing that anti-racist lens into their work, because they are a global network of human rights funders and grant makers, right? And what we helped them with last year was shifting the understanding of the fact that philanthropic organizations have a great deal of power, and an anti-racist lens needs to be placed on that power. And so they moved their understanding from okay, well, we're focusing on, Eurocentric or North American issues. And it's like, no, those aren't the issues that need to be focused on. We should be focusing on the global South, the global East, and the global West. And so that's some of the work that we've been working on. Some of our other partners include organizations like we mentioned, the Black Infinity Collective, RISE Network, which is an education support organization supporting 9 schools throughout the state. We work with Elm City Communities, the Housing Authority of New Haven. We work with the community builders on affordable housing. Also down the line of the affordable housing is ConCorp, the Connecticut Community Outreach and Revitalization Program. I think that another organization that folks can kind of look out for, because they're doing some really great things right now, is Black Haven. The Black Haven Film Fest that aired last year really got some traction, and we're excited about some of the things coming out from them.
Oh, thank you for all of that. A film festival, how cool.
We're really excited about it. Yeah.
That's so cool. Anyways, thank you very much for taking the time to talk with us. It sounds like you're really busy, and I want to say I'm really thankful that we have an organization like you and like yours in Connecticut. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I would just ask your listeners to follow The Narrative Project. It's at The Narrative Project on all channels except Twitter, which is at TMP_CT.
Okay, thanks. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, Mercy, for joining us this afternoon. Don't forget to tune in next week for another episode. And for more information about our discussion with Mercy and the Narrative Project, check out our web story at ctlatinonews.com. And don't forget to follow us on all of our social media handles, on Twitter at CTLatinoNews and on Instagram at CT_Latino News. I'm Savani Campos with CTLN Opinion Plus. See you next time.